This video is for the drawing class, observational drawing. It also relates to the perspective class. This is actually a perspective image. But as we start to look at this idea of light and shadow and referencing that section from the reading that talks about this logical flow of light and shadow, I want to kind of explain why this works and why some of this information is important, especially when we have kind of documentation images for a drawing class. So what you can see here is we've got these kind of purple lines extending back from the shadows, and part of what this is doing is trying to find out where the light source is in an image. If you're going to add new pieces to an existing image, you really need to make sure the light and shadow makes sense. And so understanding where the light source is part of the first steps of that process. Documenting observational drawing and trying to recreate it, this also should happen to a certain degree. It'll lead us to where the light sources, whether it's one or multiple, are located, and kind of help us see if the image is kind of working together in a collaboration that makes sense. So we have a lot of these vertical posts that help represent multiple objects in this sense. What I'm doing here is we have the shadow, and basically following the edge of the shadow. I'm trying to ignore some of the details, but the main vertical piece, following them back. And what that leads us to, and you'll learn in perspective, is what's called a shadow vanishing point. You don't need to know that part if you're in the drawing class. In perspective, you should. But what that is basically where the light source is on the ground plane. So if you have a lamp in a room, it tells you that the lamp is here on the floor. It doesn't tell you where the light source is itself, but gives you the direction of the shadows. And so you can see in the next image, this works consistently through all the shadows, that they're going to converge at this nice point. And so even something like the egg drawing, we have kind of the direction of the eggs. Those shadows should kind of lead us back in a certain direction. There should be that connective aspect to it. And seeing that and understanding that can help make sure if, well, this doesn't feel right, why doesn't it feel right? We can start to look at directions of shadows. We're primarily in drawing working concerned about value, but some of these things matter in observational elements as well. The more your observational skills are, the less you really need to know about perspective if you're drawing a real scene, because your observations can be that strong. But having perspective becomes another tool, and we've talked a good bit about in the drawing class, using your tools effectively. Well, having some basic knowledge of perspective, such as its direction, helps. We can also kind of work back through the light source and so on to kind of figure out where it is. And this is more of a sense of, do the shadow lengths make sense? Do I have one shadow that's really long and one that's really short? That's possible, especially if the light source is almost directly above one of them and one of the eggs is kind of out further. You're going to have different lengths. But how do we kind of confirm this? And so this is kind of the process. That's getting a little bit more into perspective. What I want the drawing students to understand is this directional aspect of the shadows, that there is this kind of element that makes sense. Now, we can get some of this with multiple light sources and start to talk about reflective light. Does that make sense? If we had multiple shadows, trying to figure out the multiple light sources and making sure they all work together. But for drawing, my thought is keep it simple. Don't kind of make it overwhelming. Single light source is perfect for everything we do. Position your light source in a way that gives you the best advantage of the shadows. For perspective students, they're creating imaginary space, so they get a little bit more freedom to kind of do as they want. But those rules of how light works are very consistent. We can go out and take photographs around space, and this is going to work consistently over and over again. It's part of why perspective works. It tends to be much more of a science and has a lot of basis in math than it is kind of the more creative art side. But this helps influence us. It becomes another tool, and I cannot stress that. Let's use our tools effectively. There's no reason not to use them. They're an advantage we have, and let's make use of them. And I think the first start for both perspective students and drawing students is understanding that direction of the shadows. We're going to look at this kind of more and more for both classes as we get into the second half of the course. But this is kind of a brief overview of this image. If you don't have this image, you don't know where it's posted, let me know and I will send it to you. And of course, if you have any questions, let me know.